They want to take out the US leader, me, US President Donald Trump declared after the fact, adding, "I'm on every list. I saw this morning. I'm on every single one of their lists, and so far, I guess I've been a little bit lucky. But that maybe doesn't last very long." What prompted this statement? Iran tried to assassinate Trump. While Trump was in Ankara, Turkey, where he met with NATO leaders, a plot was brewing in the darkest depths of Tehran. This was a chance to destroy Air Force One and take Trump out of the picture. But the US foiled the plot with one smart move. And what came next humiliated Iran, teaching the regime a simple lesson: make stupid choices and win stupid prizes. It all started in Ankara, where Trump flew to take part in a NATO summit that included leaders from all over NATO's member nations. The gathering was supposed to be an opportunity for those leaders to build deeper ties and discuss what needed to be done about growing threats all over the world, including in Russia and the Gulf. But behind the scenes, something strange happened. Trump had flown into Ankara on the new version of Air Force One, which was gifted to the US by Qatar. That jet was already controversial. Trump has had to bat back accusations that the jet was a gift to him rather than the US. Plus, the jet would take a while to kit out with all the defensive equipment that is on board the previous Air Force One. Additional upgrades and enhancements are due in the fall, says the White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt. But they're not in place yet, and that may be the reason why Trump made a strange decision in Ankara. Though Trump flew into Ankara on the Qatari jet, he completed at least part of the return trip home on the older version of Air Force One that the jet is supposed to replace. Trump was nonchalant at the time. When asked why he made the switch, he simply replied that he wanted to fly on the other jet for old time's sake. But Trump was hiding something. The switch was made for a much bigger reason than that. Iran was trying to assassinate Trump. And through its proxies, the Iranian regime thought it had the perfect opportunity to get the American president. That's according to an explosive July 24th report in the New York Times, which says that Trump was forced to abruptly switch planes due to a credible emerging threat. Iranian proxy forces were actively targeting him and the Air Force One. That left the Secret Service with a key decision to make. Would they allow Trump to use the Qatari jet, knowing that it isn't quite maxed out to the point where it could reliably deal with a threat? Or should the Secret Service switch Trump to the older version of Air Force One, which does have all of its defensive measures in place? Secret Service chose the latter option. And just like that, Iran was left with egg on its collective face as its grand assassination plans fell apart. We don't know a huge amount about the assassination plot, which isn't surprising. Iran certainly isn't going to announce precisely how it wants to take Trump out of the picture, and the US is cagey with the details because it doesn't want to reveal too much to Iran about how much it actually knows. However, we do know that the proxy forces that were involved in this assassination attempt weren't targeting the Qatari jet specifically, though that jet gave them an opportunity for a strike. They wanted to hit Trump and whatever aircraft he happened to be traveling in at the time. Beyond that, the White House has said little. No official briefing has been delivered to the press, and the New York Times reveals that even key members of Congress and the administration weren't provided with any information beyond the switch being a precautionary measure. That turned out to be an understatement. Trump's life was at risk and the Secret Service had to act. One thing that we know for sure is that Iran hasn't been shy about making threats against Trump's life. The country's current supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, posted an interesting statement to X in the wake of the assassination attempt stating, "We pledge to avenge your pure blood and the blood of all the martyrs of these two, recent, wars by taking revenge against the criminal, disgraceful murderers. This vengeance is what our nation is demanding, and this must definitely be done." The younger Khamenei clearly wants revenge for the death of his father, Ali Khamenei, during the opening stages of Operation Epic Fury. And if the supreme leader demands it, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps has to make it happen. Trump himself has long claimed to be on the Iranian regime's hit list, as you saw from the quote that opened the video. And Iran has tried something like this before. Back in 2024, a pair of Iran-linked plots against Trump's life were uncovered, Time magazine reports. The first, which came to light in July 2024, involved a Pakistani man named Asif Merchant, who was arrested for a plot to kill several US politicians, with Trump being among them. Later in the year, Fahad Shakari, who is an Afghan national, was arrested for reportedly being directed by Iran's government to create an assassination plan to take out Trump. Even now, the threats are still coming, and they're not just directed at Trump. On July 28th, The Independent reported that Iran has released a concerning video entitled "Where to Kill Melania," which shows the First Lady's motorcade traveling through New York City and actively tells freedom fighters to attack her. Not even Trump's son, Barron, has escaped the threats. As the video concludes, "Barron Trump, wait for us." So if you're wondering how serious the threat posed to Trump in Ankara truly was, there can only be one answer: serious. Iran's regime is making it very clear that killing Trump and his family members is high on the agenda. As for how Iran might have done it, the mention of proxies is very revealing. Iran doesn't want to take out Trump directly. It knows that killing the sitting US president and taking direct responsibility for doing it would bring down a world of hurt and could even lead to the triggering of Article 5, bringing dozens of other nations into the war in the Gulf region. So Iran wants to use proxies, groups of militants outside of Iran, though funded and equipped by the regime, that can launch attacks while granting Iran's regime plausible deniability. The most likely attack vector would be through the IRGC's Quds force, which the Council on Foreign Relations describes as an expeditionary arm that partners with Iran's various regional militant groups. It's the Quds force that coordinates with the likes of Hamas, the Houthis, and Hezbollah, directing arms to the groups and delivering instructions from the supreme leader covering what Iran wants those groups to do. The Quds force is no small group. Specializing in spy work and subterfuge, the group has about 15,000 members, and it has a long history of managing assassinations on behalf of Iran's regime. When Iran exploded into protest toward the end of 2025 and into early 26, it was the Quds force that oversaw the assassinations of several key protesters to cause chaos in the ranks, reports Iran International. The Quds force also oversaw a 2011 plot to kill Saudi ambassador to the US Adel al-Jubair, with the goal being to use a Mexican drug cartel to carry out the assassination. Whenever Iran wants to create disruption, the fingerprints of the Quds force are often found. And with decades of experience, it seems likely that the force was trying to activate militants in Turkey or a nearby country to organize a strike against Air Force One. Knowing the scale of the threat, the Secret Service made the call to switch jets, and here's why. The Qatari jet that is now being used as Air Force One lacks many of the defensive countermeasures that are installed on the previous version. The New York Times revealed that in a July 9th piece, where it stated that several officials told the outlet that the Qatari jet doesn't have the same anti-missile capabilities as the older Air Force One. Questions were being raised in 2025 about the work being undertaken on the Qatari jet, and whether that work would be enough to provide the required security. White House Communications Director Stephen Chung was asked about those measures following Trump's jet switch. He responded, "The new Air Force One is a state-of-the-art aircraft that has been fitted with high-level security protocols that ensure the safety of the president and his staff. As the president has said recently, there are many enemies of America who have their sights on him, and we use every tool at our disposal to address those threats." That statement doesn't reveal a whole lot, but the security protocols in place are clearly not at the level they need to be to protect the president's life. Contrast this with the older version of Air Force One. We know for sure that this older jet has an array of countermeasures designed to repel the sort of aerial attack that Iran and its proxies were likely planning. Many of those countermeasures are classified for obvious reasons. However, we do know that the older Air Force One incorporates electronic warfare suites for missile diversion, anti-surface-to-air missile tech, and is even able to handle the triggering of an electromagnetic pulse while in the air. Simple Flying adds that the jet has infrared countermeasures used for missile redirection, including several ANALQ-204 Matador jammers. Add to that the ability to hold up to 2,000 meals in its galleys and aerial refueling capabilities, and you have a jet built to stay in the sky for the long haul while defending itself against threats. In serious cases, the US also deploys fighter jets to flank Air Force One, though it seems unlikely they were deployed in Ankara. With all of this in mind, it's obvious why the Secret Service chose to have Trump switch his jets, but it's what came next that's more shocking. The timing of this assassination attempt is key, and you're going to learn why in a moment. First, this is a reminder that you're watching The Military Show. We bring you the full picture, not just the headlines, so hit subscribe and enable notifications if you want to stay ahead of the curve. Let's come back to the Ankara summit. That meeting was held between July 7th and 8th. Do you remember what else happened on those dates? The US started a new round of airstrikes in Iran. Though Trump claimed that this round of strikes started as revenge for Iran's bombing of merchant vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, the timeline seems to match almost perfectly. July 8th marked the second day of what will become almost a full 2 weeks of strikes against Iran. That second day of strikes was also the second day of the Ankara summit, and it's likely that Trump would have received word of the threat posed to his life by that point. On July 8th alone, the US launched missiles and bombs at Iran's port city of Bandar Abbas, which is home to an Iranian naval base, as well as at the southern coastal city of Sirik and the Bushehr province, which is home to Iran's major nuclear power plant complex. This was revenge, just as Trump said, but perhaps not for what was happening in the Strait of Hormuz. Trump may have taken the threat to his life personally, as well as considering it an attempt by Iran to restart a conflict that had been subject to a shaky ceasefire for several months. Proxies be damned. The US knows that Iran is behind these groups. It met the assassination attempt with fire from the skies, teaching Iran a crucial lesson about poking the bear. Just don't do it, Iran. Even a hint that you want to assassinate Trump is enough to spark a firestorm across the entire country. The 13 days of strikes that followed Iran's assassination attempt have now ended, sort of. July 26th marked the third day of a loose ceasefire that is now in place to allow the US and Iran to restart negotiations. This doesn't mean that the US is willing to forgive and forget. As Ambassador Mike Waltz said on July 26th, "We'll see over the next coming days, but make no mistake, additional military assets are moving into the region. The regime should believe the president when he says they're locked and loaded, and where all options are on the table." In other words, 13 consecutive days of strikes in retaliation for Iran's assassination attempt amounted to a warning shot. The regime gets out of line or tries something to harm Trump again, the next round of strikes will be even more devastating. Still, there's a ceasefire in place for now. The spokesperson for Iran's health ministry, Hossein Kermanpour, even marked the first day of the ceasefire with a social media post where he said, "It seems our dear Iran had a peaceful night last night, and no part of its body was struck or hit. Iran's body is intact. Iran's head is healthy." Even Trump seems determined to get negotiations back on course, despite what almost happened to him. Trump wants to push forward and get a deal over the line. On July 28th, Al Jazeera reported the US president as saying that Washington and Iran engaged in very friendly negotiations, following the pausing of military strikes, adding that there was a good chance of real progress being made in the talks for the first time in weeks. So the ship has been righted. Everything is on course again. The only thing that could end this new ceasefire is if Iran does something stupid, like, say, launching a secret attack against a US military base in the Gulf region. We'll give you 3 tries to guess what Iran just did. In a ridiculous move that seems to have been designed to derail negotiations that were going well, even after an assassination attempt, Iran launched a surprise attack against US forces on the evening of July 28th. 4 ballistic missiles were launched at a US base in Jordan, US Central Command reported. And though all of the missiles appear to have been intercepted, with Central Command adding that the unwarranted attacks against US forces were not successful, these strikes mean that a war that seemed to be simmering down has once again escalated. The news broke about these strikes during the production of this video. By the time you're watching, the US may well have retaliated with attacks of its own, bringing an end to the latest attempt at a ceasefire. Trump had met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House just hours before Iran launched its secret attack, which may offer a hint to Iran's motivation. It may not be an assassination plot, but we're willing to bet that the US will want retribution, just as it did after foiling Iran's attempts to take out Air Force One. Returning to the assassination attempt, the US hasn't let the whole thing be. In addition to launching days of attacks against Iran in retaliation, US authorities have launched an investigation into the assassination attempt. However, that investigation doesn't seem to be focused on Iran. Instead, FBI agents are actively seeking information from government officials as they look into the possibility of a leak that may have given Iran cause to attempt the killing of Trump in the first place. In a July 15th report, the New York Times revealed that FBI agents spoke to several people who flew aboard the Qatari Air Force One in Ankara and have gone so far as to ask some of those officials to hand over their phones so that the FBI can check them for evidence of a leak. One official briefed on the investigation, who spoke to the New York Times on condition of anonymity, said that some of those whom investigators have tried to reach include the Secret Service agents who traveled with Trump. Those officials will have referred any outside requests to their lawyers per instructions from the Secret Service leadership. However, the question now has to be asked. Is this just standard procedure, or does the FBI believe that a member of the Secret Service may have leaked information to Iran and its proxies? The Trump administration has also taken an interesting approach to the aftermath of the assassination attempt. It's turned part of its collective fury toward journalists from the New York Times, who are among several who reported on the security concerns related to the Qatari Air Force One we mentioned. That investigation is being led by FBI Director Kash Patel, suggesting that the Trump administration believes that any reporting on Air Force One needs to be monitored so as to not provide clues about weaknesses to the enemy. This secondary investigation raises questions about press freedom, as well as forcing us to ask the obvious. If the White House knew that the Qatari Air Force One wasn't ready yet, why was it using it? We may never get an answer to that question, but for now, Trump is safe. The older Air Force One did what it was always designed to do, and Iran's attempts to assassinate via proxies failed. However, the conflict in the Gulf is far from over. Iran's surprise attack in Jordan has reignited the war after just a few days of calm. More is coming, more strikes in Iran, more Iranian responses, and perhaps even more attempts on Trump's life. Iran's regime may have been humiliated this time around, but that doesn't mean it won't try again if the opportunity presents itself. If Iran keeps on pushing its luck, the US may end up doing the unthinkable, launching a full ground invasion. That option is still on the table for the US, but how would it go? And would it work out the way America wants? We answer those questions and more in our video where we discuss one possible invasion scenario. Check it out to learn more, and remember to subscribe to the Military Show as we chart the latest developments in the war between the US and Iran. And thank you as always for watching.